Welcome back to Beyond Well with Sheila Hamilton. I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Brian Goff. Hey, Brian.
Hey, Sheila.
And Dr. Jenna Lejeune.
So nice to see you again.
So, you guys, I always like to explain why I get really passionate about people. And I had an interview with Ken Cervera. Correct pronunciation there, right, Ken?
You nailed it.
I had an interview with Ken Cervera that moved me so deeply because this is a guy who hosts a podcast called Own Your Truth. And what he's essentially doing is taking stories of people who've suffered greatly and who have learned really incredible lessons from that suffering. And so I was thinking, well, Jenna and Brian are going to love this guy because that's essentially their practice, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
right up my alley.
And Ken is also the director of wellness at the Reswell program at the Mind Health Institute in Pasadena. And Ken, I just want to, first of all, welcome you to the show and thank you for doing such a tremendously important podcast.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here with all of you today. Really excited.
So could you just give us a little bit of background, Ken, on why you decided to do Own Your Truth podcast? What interested you about post-traumatic growth?
You know, it evolved organically, honestly, through a long process of me getting through my own difficult sort of dark journey and then arriving actually pretty serendipitously in the field of mental health. And being able to hear multiple stories of some of the pain and difficult times that other people have been through, parents, kids, and I just realized early on in my journey within the field of mental health, I started to see little bits and pieces of myself in other people's suffering. And I was inspired by these stories that, due to HIPAA compliance, I could never share.
Yeah.
Which I just felt was such a tragedy because I felt like if the rest of the world could hear people who were going through this kind of journey, whether it was suicidality, severe depression, or anxiety, or having kids who are in crisis, there was just so many inspiring moments of resilience and strength that the rest of the world couldn't see that I was taking home with me, and it was lighting me up. It was really giving me the fuel I needed to, quote unquote, own my truth. And so it was a part of my journey to really, it inspired me to find a platform or create one where I could directly connect with other individuals who were maybe going through some of the same things either I had struggled with or stories I had heard about. And that is really the origin story of the Own Your Truth podcast.
It's so beautiful. You know, I think most people in their lives want to avoid the pain and suffering, but after listening to this podcast, you're like, whoa, these people turned into superheroes, you know?
Yeah.
Super cool.
Yeah.
You had an episode, I think it was 3 episodes ago, called Your Dark Story. And it was your own account of what had happened to you as a young man. And I want you to share that with Brian and Jenna, if you would, Ken.
Yeah, that was a pretty dark moment in my life. It was a 2009 sort of where it all came to a close. It was just a period of my life where I just felt really isolated and alone and lost. I quite honestly didn't know what my purpose was anymore. And I think knowing, I guess, the way my personality works is I took a special kind of pride in not sharing pain. And there was a moment where, you know, I decided this is it for me. I decided I wanted to end my own life and wanted to do it in a way where the people that were closest to me and loved me the most wouldn't be as impacted as if I had left a suicide note. So I wanted to cover it up as a roadway accident. And all of this stuff you can really get from the episode. But what I want to really share today is, I guess, what got me to that moment, which was just feeling embarrassed and ashamed to share where I was at. Because for me, I had constructed an identity of being strong and resilient and the person that people go to when they need help. So for me to even think about the idea of sharing it, the fact that I was in pain, a lot of it, that was a fate for me worse than death. So I think the reason I got there was a lot of that stemmed from habits as a young kid. Really, I had pretty severe ear infections as a kid, to the point where I remember my mother was having a conversation with the doctor when he examined my ears. He looked at my mom and said, "How is this child not screaming in pain?" So I think from a pretty young age, I just got very used to associating a certain amount of pain as normal. You know, it didn't dawn on me at that age, well, you mean other people don't have severe piercing pain through their ear canal? Doesn't everybody deal with this?
Wow.
So I sort of developed this habit, I guess, of asking myself, what's the point of sharing pain? Going through those pivotal moments in life when I left college and sort of was at a loss with what I wanted to do with my life and didn't open up or connect and have conversations with those who were close to me about the way I was feeling, it just sort of compounded. You know, I could just sort of feel my own habits working against me and my own mindset. And I guess the best way to describe this point in my life is that for years I sort of quietly struggled with or hated the noise of my own thoughts. And this really evolved into me hating the sound of my own voice. So even for me, doing the podcast was a bit of a struggle. And a lot of days it still is, because I have to overcome it with each episode.
Wow.
Just hearing myself is a bit of a trip.
Wow.
Yeah, my mindset back then was pretty difficult. I was very hard on myself. Looking back on those
Ken,
days.
I want to just bring in Dr. Goff, because I know, especially with young men, he's going to probably relate to a lot of what you're saying. First, about this kind of shield that young men put up in terms of being masculine and being able to handle it, especially pain. You're not supposed to talk about pain, both physical or emotional, and how that can cascade to the point where people are feeling like, I have no one. I have no one who knows me or really understands what's going on with me.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you said it. I think the message for a lot of us guys is that we're supposed to fix things. We're supposed to manage things. We're supposed to, be problem solvers, and not the people who say, okay, wait, that's a lot, or that hurts, or I'm sad, or I just need a good cry. Like, there's something almost antithetical to traditional, I was going to say toxic, but I think traditional masculinity, that we're not supposed to be like that. We're supposed to be, tough. That's the idea, right? And to me, like, the thing that I just resonates with me, Ken, in what you're talking about is the isolation that creates. One of my soapboxes is people who, everybody does this now on social media, where you have hundreds or maybe even thousands of people who follow you, but it's this curated life of these perfect little pictures, and you still feel alone. Well, I can do the same sort of thing face to face by sort of curating my experience in real time to say everything's cool, or to make a joke, or to not share what's going on in my life with anybody. And I can be alone in a crowded room.
Ken, you said something so beautiful in your podcast that is ringing off of what Dr. Goff just mentioned, and that was that you were experiencing a loneliness. You were experiencing a degree of loneliness that you didn't think was possible as a human being. I remember hearing that phrase and thinking, wow, I really want to know more about how a guy who's as handsome, as well-spoken, as capable as you are got to that point. And I think Brian just hit on it. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, that's the best way I can describe it. I mean, things got to the point where, I could be in social settings and situations with friends and many times the life of the party and having fun, and then also feeling just completely alone and isolated.
Yeah.
Like, it's just wearing of this mask that got to be so heavy to the point where I just started to remove myself over time from those situations and environments, because it just, in many ways, it was kind of a reminder of the loneliness and that darkness and that period of my life where I just struggled to connect with people in an authentic way. You know, and some of those habits still linger on today. Like, I don't know, this is oversharing, but sorry, baby. My wife, she's an amazing woman who lovingly jokes. She's like, you know, babe, if it wasn't for me, you wouldn't have any friends. And she's absolutely right, because I just, for years, I did not do well at maintaining friendships. People would reach out to hang out and connect, and for me, after a while, it just became exhausting to pretend like I wanted to do that. I usually felt energized in solitude, not in social environments.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest part of that rings true is really the terrible habit that I evolved was when I realized I'm going to exit. I'm going to end my life. This is back in 2009. So what's the point of putting any more effort and energy and time into developing these connections that I'm going to leave?
Yeah.
But those habits still ring true today, not as profoundly, but I just have to be aware of it, because it does come up quite often.
You know, Ken, it's effortful to have the shield up, right? I mean, or the persona. It's like the pressure of having to take the perfect picture for Instagram times whatever. But then also, and I think a lot of people have this experience that when you're by yourself, you're alone, but you're only really, it almost seems like you're a special kind of loneliness when you feel alone around other people, right? And so it's like, if I'm by myself, then that feeling of like, oh, it's just me here. It's like, it makes sense. Of course it is. And as it should be, because I'm by myself right now. But when I'm in a group of people and I see them like laughing and making eye contact and socializing, and even people who are doing that with me, and this voice that says, you are so alone. No one knows. No one knows. That is just this special level of isolation.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say that I don't think loneliness has much to do with how many people you have around you. Loneliness has to do with whether the stuff that is occurring on the inside of you is known by others. And I was struck, Ken, by something you said about having those ear infections. And you said, as a little kid, you thought, what? Not everybody has this like piercing thing going through their head, and like, isn't that interesting? Of when we can't share what's going on, we can't get feedback about other people's experience. So whether it's your assumption that, oh well, I guess this is just normal, everybody has this, or the opposite, which is, well, nobody else suffers this way that I am. Nobody else feels as dark as I am. Yeah. That's where the loneliness comes through. Yes. And I think one of my personal feelings about where the mental health community has failed is that we perpetuate this idea that the solution is to get rid of the suffering. Versus my perspective is the solution is to be able to get the suffering out in the open and to be able to have people talk about it so that we can respond to it in more effective ways. And I think, trying to do this thing of, well, you're broken, you're ill, you have some mental disease, and therefore go fix it. Don't talk about it.
Go to the doctor and get it fixed, and then you can come back to the party.
And then you can talk about it. Yes. Yeah. That's just perpetuating that problem.
Yeah.
Ken, if you would, I hope you're willing to share some of the details about what happened when you got on your motorcycle that day. Because I feel as if there was some kind of intervention, and I don't know why it occurred, but I do think that there was an intervention that allowed you to sort of change the trajectory that you were on. Would you talk about that?
Absolutely. That was surreal. I mean, it was almost, to this day, I can't really do it justice, even in my own voice or just explaining it, because it really was this perfectly timed moment where I had just made it through the intersection and just experienced, everything you do when the nervous system's trying to settle you down, right? Like you're shaking, shivering, and then got through that point of like realizing I just tried to end my life. the shame of that was so incredibly overpowering, and I just literally looked around. No one was there from 1 second to the next. And my second thought was like, okay, let's get back out in the intersection, get this done, because I don't want to live with this or like this, with the knowledge that this is what I just did. And then as I was looking back to go do that, the LAPD rolled up beside me. It's just surreal. And then the officer just rolled down his window and looked at me and said, "That was your life right there." And that just, it woke me up. I mean, he was right. And then he just said, "Go home." It was just so eerie and like spooky the way it happened. It was like this, he was there from 1 second to the next and rolled up his windows and then rolled away. But
and didn't even give you a ticket. Oh. That's what's, the most remarkable thing about that is in LA, where they're going to really slap you with a $300 fine if you just breathe wrong. The guy just said that was your life and rolled up the window. I find that just haunting. So what did you start doing? Like, go ahead, Ken.
Oh, no, I was just going to agree with you. I think I was expecting to get a ticket. I was like, this guy, of course I get a ticket right now because it's LA.
Yeah, exactly. What did you start doing differently after that day, Ken, in terms of your thinking, how you were caring for yourself, and your willingness to ask for help?
That ride home was just, that was the moment I decided, well, I'm not going to do this. So I had to make a conscious choice to decide to live, really. But I decided that in that moment and on the ride back home, it began with a conscious choice. Like my awareness in that moment was so profound, and I'll never forget the way I felt at that intersection. And I think one of the biggest tools I took away from that moment was, for years, I was like, the first 2 to 3 years in that dark space, I was convincing myself, this is something you need to get over so you can be whole again. And then somewhere around year 4 or 5, I just realized there's nothing to get over. There's nothing to, and this is just my experience here, so take this with a grain of salt. But I decided I'm going to carry this with me. It's going to be a part of me. It's not going away. And I don't have to be ashamed of it anymore. Mm-hmm. In fact, it's the thing that just really opens me up. Like it's that moment opened up my life and the way I view all of my relationships and how I connect with other people, because I know nothing will ever be able to get me back to that intersection. But when life gets hard again, and God forbid something traumatic happens to me or someone I love, like I know what it feels like to give up, to be broken. So having those lessons in that moment and just making a conscious choice to carry that darkness with me and not be ashamed of it and actually be grateful. For me, gratitude was the beginning of the healing process for me. Like there was a moment where I was in a session with a parent who was sharing very openly about some of the struggles of their child and how they were suicidal. And this was, years later from me being at that intersection. And I just remember in my office, I was like, oh, okay, I get it. I get it now. Like I was meant to go through that intersection. I was meant to be in that dark place so that I could come out of it and be fully present with this person in the room.
Yes.
And I think
I love that, that these dark times, the suffering that we as humans go through isn't just something to try and get through. It can be this profound teacher if we're open to it.
Yeah.
I love that part of your story.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Ken, you're now married and you have a 3-year-old son, and I was thinking about what you've been through, how it must inform you as a parent, so that you when your son cries, you're like, yeah, good job, telling me what you're feeling, right? I mean, I can imagine that you're thinking about this every day as you raise a toddler into a boy, into a young man.
Oh, every day. Sheila. It's a constant. Like it's such a daily part of my existence as a father, and watching my son. Oh my God, when he cries too, it's like these Disney movie big eye tears that you're just like, here's a pony, don't cry, stop. But the flip side of that coin for me is really those moments where I get to be there, like you're saying, just fully present with him, holding him and saying, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Son, that you're in pain. He got an owie yesterday. You know, I must have took 20 minutes to calm him down, give him an ice pack and hug him out. And I'm just teaching him to not be ashamed of the tears and the crying. One moment in particular where we were in the living room. This is after a couple of palomas, and we're a little tipsy, and we like to have fun with our kiddo. We take him to a couple of favorite brunch spots in Highland Park. But we were home that evening, and we just finished reading a book, and we're putting him down for bed. And then the book I was reading to him was about these kids who were lost in this dark forest, and they come across this very scary black-looking wolf with red eyes. And I think it scared him. It's kind of an advanced book for a 3-year-old, but the lesson of the story is that these kids encounter this wolf again in the forest, and it turns out to be this cute little puppy. So it's a really sweet, endearing story. But I'll never forget this moment, because my son, as we're about to tuck him down to bed, he's like, Dada, were you in a dark forest? You know, it's like one of those moments where you're thinking, this kid's 3. He doesn't know. He can't freaking know. But then the other part of my brain's like, maybe he does. Like maybe on some level, my son understands that his father was in pain. So
and sees you.
That moment just really shook me, but it was so beautiful because I could actually I lost it. Like I was crying. You know, I gave him a big hug and I said, yes, son, Dada was in a dark forest and Mama helped him get out. And that's the truth.
Beautiful,
that's the truth.
Ken.
So,
I am so hoping, because our time's limited today, Ken, that you can make it to Portland and sit here with us for another session. I am such a big fan of your podcast now and of the work that you're doing at the Mind Health Institute. I could talk to you all day. Honestly, your story resonates with so many people, I think especially young men hearing it today. And I'm really, really grateful you chose to share it with us, Ken.
Thank you guys for this opportunity. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Ken, again, the host of the podcast, Own Your Truth. Get it on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks again, Ken.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Beyond Well, and if you love the podcast, we would love a review. You can leave it at iTunes, Spotify, or over on Podbean. One of the things that we're doing is asking for contributions to the Foundation for Excellence in Mental Health Care, because they believe, like we do, that suffering is being human. Thanks again. From Portland, Oregon, this is Sheila Hamilton.